I'm Paul Tevis, and I'm here to teach you how to play Don't Turn Your Back, a board game set in the world of the Don't Rest Your Head role-playing game. Don't Turn Your Back takes place in the Mad City, where nightmares walk the streets, and a good night's sleep can get you killed. Every now and then, people known as the Awake, chronic insomniacs from our world, the city slumbering, break through the barriers of normal human perception and cross over to the Mad City, becoming trapped there, yet gaining strange, powerful abilities. Most of the Awake live a short, phantasmagorical, frantic life before it quite literally eats them alive. However, there are those rare few who manage to master the city and even find a way to escape. In Don't Turn Your Back, you are an Awake, competing for just such a chance to escape. Place the city board face up in the middle of the table. In a 3-player game, do not use the board spaces marked with a 4, and in a 2-player game, do not use the spaces marked with either a 4 or a 3-4. Remove the first admonishment card from the 13th District Laws deck and shuffle the rest. In a 2- or 4-player game, deal 7 cards at random. In a 3-player game, deal 8 cards at random. Place these cards face down on the Laws space in the 13th District, and place the first admonishment card on top, face up. Players should not look at the unused cards. Each player takes a player board, deck, and a candle marker of the same color. All players put their candle marker on the start space of the candle track. Each player separates her start deck, cards labeled start in the upper right corner, from her acquisition deck, the rest of her cards. Each player shuffles her acquisition deck, places it face down on the designated space on her player board, and then turns 6 cards from this deck face up, to the right of her player board. This is the player's available acquisition card row. Each player then shuffles her start deck and places this face down in the designated space on her player board. This is her draw deck. Each player draws a hand of 4 cards from her draw deck. The player who has been awake the longest goes first and takes the starting player card. Now you're ready to play. Don't Turn Your Back has elements of both a deck-building game and a worker placement game. It's a deck-building game in the sense that every player has their own personal deck of cards. At the beginning of the game, this is just the cards in your start deck. You add new cards to your deck, and you remove some cards from it throughout the game. Whenever you need to add cards to your hand, they come from your face-down draw deck. When you need to discard cards, they go to your own personal discard pile, which is kept face up. Anytime you need to draw cards, and your draw deck has no cards left in it, you shuffle your discard pile, turn it face down to become your new draw deck, and then continue drawing your cards. It is a worker placement game in the sense that your cards are placed into a limited number of available spaces on the game board and fulfill different functions depending on what area of the game board you place them in. Placing cards in different parts of the board gives you the resources to acquire new cards, remove cards from your deck, gain special abilities, and score victory points. A 2- or 4-player game takes place over 8 turns, and a 3-player game takes 9 turns. Turns in Don't Turn Your Back have 4 phases: place cards, acquire, score, clean up, and draw up. This phase will involve several rounds of card play. Each round, in turn order beginning with the starting player, each player may play 1 card from her hand onto an open space in one of the districts, representing her ability to influence a nightmare to act on her behalf. The same card may have different uses depending on where it is placed. Let's take a look at the features of a card. Along the left edge, you see abbreviations for the various districts on the board. Each card can only be played in the districts listed on it. If all the spaces in the districts where a card can be played are full, then the card cannot be played that turn. Here in the upper right, you can see the cost of the card, or its identification as a start card. In the upper left, you can see the pain value of the card. Pain refers to how powerful the nightmare on the card is. In most districts, the card's pain value is its most important attribute, and in most cases, the higher the pain value, the more valuable the card will be. Here you see the card's Bizarre Service effect. This is a special text effect that only activates when the card is placed in the Bizarre Bazaar. The game board is divided into 5 districts. The same card will serve different functions depending on which district it is played in. When cards are played in District 13, the High School, the City Slumbering, or the Wax Kingdom, their effect is based on their pain value. Usually, the higher the pain number, the more effective that card will be. The effect of cards played in these districts will be resolved in the acquisition and scoring phases. When players play cards into the High School, they must always play into the open space closest to the start space. There are no such considerations for placement in the other districts. When cards occupy all the spaces in a district, then no more cards can be played into that district. All cards which can be played into the Bazaar have text effects, which become active only when the cards are played onto a bazaar space. These represent services that the Nightmares can perform or procure for you. Cards played in the Bazaar mostly have immediate effects. For example, Carmen plays her Harvester card into the bazaar. The Harvester effect causes Carmen to move all cards from her acquisition row to her acquisition discard, and draw 6 new cards for the acquisition row. The Harvester's effect thus creates an acquisition discard pile, separate from the player's regular discard pile. This space is marked on the player board. The Harvester effect then causes Carmen to immediately acquire a card of cost 2 or 3. A few cards have effects that are ongoing or will occur in later rounds or phases. Some bazaar effects are attack effects, which can adversely impact one or more other players. These effects can be blocked if the target player has a defender card already in the bazaar when the attack is played. Attacks which lower a player's score cannot reduce her score below 0. Players continue playing one card at a time into open spaces on the district boards until each of them runs out of cards, has no spaces they can legally play cards onto, or chooses to pass. Once a player has passed, she may not subsequently play cards, even if another player's actions have created new options for her. When all players have passed, the play cards phase is complete. The pain value of cards played into the City Slumbering turn into cost points, which the players can spend to acquire as many new cards as they can afford from their available acquisition card row. Some cards also pay cost points when they're played in the Bazaar. Whenever a player acquires a card, that card is placed in the player's discard pile. A new card is immediately turned face up from the player's acquisition deck and placed face up in her available acquisition card row. If a player's acquisition deck is exhausted when she needs to refill her acquisition row, reshuffle the player's acquisition discard pile and turn it face down to become the new acquisition deck. Players score the High School first. The player with the highest total pain value in the High School scores 1 candle for each point of pain on her own cards. Ties are broken in favor of the tied player with a card closest to the start space of the High School board. The other players in the High School get 1 candle for each card they played into the High School. In this example, Carmen first played her Promising Student in the High School for 2 pain. Dan played his Fortune Teller for 3 pain. Then Carmen played her Roof Rat for 1 pain. They have both played a total of 3 pain in the High School, but Carmen breaks the tie because she had played into the High School before Dan. Carmen scores 3 candles for the 3 pain she has played into the High School this turn. Dan scores 1 candle for the 1 card he has played into the High School this turn. After scoring, count the number of cards held in the High School by the player with the most cards played there, and remove that many cards from the High School, beginning with the start. Shift any remaining cards in the High School to the start end of the board. These cards will remain in the High School during the next turn. The 13th District awards candles and other benefits based on the conditions specified on the law card for that turn. There is usually a reward for having the highest total pain value on cards played into the 13th District, but sometimes there are rewards for players who come in second, for tied players, or for all players who play into the 13th District. Occasionally, there are penalties. In this example, the law card for the turn is the Statute of Elimination. The player with the most pain in the 13th District scores 8 candles. If there's a tie for first place, all tied players tied for first place score 6 candles, and second place still scores. The second place player scores 5 candles. If there's a tie for second place, all players tied for second place score 4 candles. After the benefits are awarded for the 13th District, discard the current law card and turn a new law card face up for the next turn. Cards played in the Wax Kingdom are transferred to the face-down encased pile. These cards have been permanently removed from the players' decks, but will help players compete for an endgame candle bonus. Players then remove their played cards from the Bazaar, the 13th District, and the City Slumbering, and return them to their discard piles. Cards left in the high school after the scoring phase remain until the next scoring phase. If players have any unplaced cards left in their hands, they may choose to either keep these or discard them. They then draw their hands up to 4 cards. The starting player card passes to the player on the left of the current starting player, and the next turn begins. The game ends at the end of the 8th turn, or the 9th turn in a 3-player game. This is the turn on which the final law card is scored, so don't worry about counting turns. The law deck will do that for you. First, players should remove all remaining start cards from their decks. Start cards do not contribute towards the player's endgame bonus. Next, the cards in the encased pile of the Wax Kingdom are turned face up, and the pain values on them are tallied for each player. How much pain a player encased in the Wax Kingdom will determine how many endgame bonus points she will score for the cards still in her deck. In other words, you don't directly score points for the cards you have encased, but the amount of pain you've encased affects how you will score for the cards you've retained in your deck. The player with the highest total pain value in the Wax Kingdom scores 1 candle for every point of cost on the cards, not the starting cards, in her deck. The player with the second highest total pain value in the Wax Kingdom scores 1 candle for every point of pain on the cards in her deck. The player with the third highest total scores 2 candles for every card in her deck. The player with the lowest total scores 1 candle for every card in her deck. If 2 players tie for 1 level of scoring, they both receive the benefit of the next lower level of scoring. For example, if 2 players tie for first place, they both score the second place bonus, and the player with the next lowest score gets the third place bonus. The player with the most candles is the winner. In the event of a tie, the tied player with the highest total cost value of cards in her deck is the winner. We hope this Teach video has been helpful. Feel free to ask us questions. Enjoy the game and the nightmares!